Hi, this is Clifford Carnicom again here with Dr. Gwen Scott, a naturopathic doctor. And Gwen, thanks a whole lot for being here.
Thank you.
And we're here for the second time around to present additional information regarding the condition that has been classified or called Morgellans. I'll put it in quotes all the time. The more that you listen to us, you may understand the reason for that. It appears to be very much a false characterization as a disease that is restricted to a few individuals that we treat with some special disinterest as opposed to interest. And so today what I wanted to do on my side was just go into a little bit more detail, particularly visually. I would like the audience to be able to see photographs of some of the forms. I have to call them pathogenic forms. I can come up with no other explanation. These are foreign to the human body. Pathogenic forms that are being repeatedly identified over and over and over, whether an individual is manifesting this condition at the skin level or not. In fact, one of the characteristics is that these pathogenic forms, although originally discovered and called to attention by individuals that exhibited unusual skin conditions, the unfortunate finding is that these very same forms that are occurring even at the skin level are being found really across the board within essentially the broad population. The way it is now, the number is up to 26 people that have performed a certain test that we've talked about, and we'll talk about more. All 26 of them are manifesting, and the only difference that I could characterize with the so-called Morgellans condition is that the degree or severity or extent of the pathogenic forms would appear to be greater. That's the furthest that I could go right now, but in terms of presence and distribution, there is no exclusion right now of the general population from what it is that is being discovered. So with that, what I wanted to do today was use some of the time I had to present some photographs to you, and I'll overlay these photographs on the screen for you to see. And I want to go through the 4 forms that are being identified. My whole objective here is I want these things identified. That's just what this is about. It's not okay to say you're seeing something over and over in the human body that is clearly foreign and causes ill conditions, disease, or ill health, whatever you want to call it within the human body. Present this information publicly in a way that can be repeated over and over and over. Anything that I could do is quite easy to describe the methods. I won't say easy in terms of equipment. You need a good microscope here. But the fact is it's very much repeatable and could be done with anyone with adequate resources. It is my objective to have these 4 forms identified. I have mentioned them in the previous meeting you and I had, Gwen. Today I'd like to go over some of the photographs of these so you see them. These 4 forms that are being repeatedly identified are as follows. The first is what I call an enclosing or a bounding filament. This filament will often exhibit itself from skin lesions. This is true. This is how they were first discovered. In the sores that appear on the skin, an unusual fiber form can appear. Of course, a casual person might think it's a hair, and this would be an argument that might be made initially. That won't hold up at all, will not hold up once you subject that to scrutiny or examination. The first form is this bounding form. A human hair is on the order of roughly 60 to 100 microns thick. The fiber that is showing up here at the skin level is on the order of roughly 12 to 20 microns. It's not fixed. There's some variability, but roughly in the order of 12 to 20 microns thick. The photograph that I'm showing you now, you see the basically exterior, the full size of that fiber. Now, what becomes unique then at this point is the second form. And the second form is often contained within this bounding or encasing filament. The second form is that of a submicron. Anytime you're dealing with things down at the submicron level, especially if you're breathing them, you certainly ought to have concern. We all know the attention that's been given to the presence of asbestos fibers in an environment over the years. Asbestos fibers measure on the order of 2 microns in thickness. If I start speaking to you of something that's being found, it shows every reason to be coming through airborne or respiratory methods coming into your system. At the submicron level, it certainly forms a basis for attention, investigation, and concern. And you will see within this bounding or encasing filament a submicron network. We're not talking about a single fiber. It is just absolutely packed with these sub-micron forms of parallel alignments of filaments. We'll talk a little bit more about similarity of fungus a little bit later, but let's just get through the pictures first. So that's number 1 and 2 of the forms. Number 3 is, technically we'll describe it as an oblate or a spherical structure. The best identification, and the size of this, size is important because it helps to identify microbiological forms. It's extremely important characteristic to be determined the size of something. You can often eliminate many things from consideration just by knowing the size alone. This particular oblate structure, best measurement I can come up with is on the order of roughly 5/10 to 7/10 of a micron. The best identification that I can make. I'm not a medical doctor. I will repeat that. There is no diagnosis being made here. There is no medical prescription or advice being made. I'm acting as an independent researcher, providing my analysis and observation for information to the public. But the best identification I can make of this form is consideration of what is called chlamydia pneumonia, which is a rather exotic bacterial form. I am not saying this is chlamydia pneumonia. I am saying there are 8 conditions that I have established that have been matched that would establish this as a leading contender for examination for identification. Remember, I'm after the identification. The best that I can do right now is provide the imagery to you to establish a path for investigation. But chlamydia pneumonia is a candidate. Chlamydia pneumonia is in a very unusual and rather exotic bacterial form. If you look at the classification schemes, it's sort of totally separate from any generic bacterial form. And one of the reasons that it is unique is that this particular bacterial form lives within cells, okay, intracellular. That is a remarkable property when you're talking about the immune system and its ability to detect the existence of a foreign element. If it's within the cell, you've complicated your problem a great deal. Chlamydia pneumonia is involved with many, many diseases that are certainly characteristic of our times and that are increasing in frequency and distribution, and let's say not exactly an explainable way. I will offer that as at least a leading contender, not restricted to, as a contender for examination or identification of these forms. And the last is what I have to call a hybrid form, and it's simply because it's somewhat unexplainable to me at this point what even form you're speaking of. Could be in the mycoplasma category, but it's basically a ribbon structure. Has some similarity to a filament network, but certainly not anything of the uniformity of the second form that I've described to you. And this particular form will exist also repeatedly within the blood samples that are being done. It's also true that these 4 forms are showing themselves across all major systems of the body. This is not something we're talking about that's restricted to a skin fiber. All major systems of the body are repeatedly showing these forms. This includes the hair, the skin, the digestive system, the urinary system, saliva, ear. It is across the board throughout the human body that these forms are being found. The second important point here, that is the 4 forms that exist. The second point to make that's very important in this would be the link with the aerosol issue. And that is that there is, as of now, a rather direct physical link that has been established between these same forms that I have just itemized for you that are being found in biological samples. There is an exact match with respect to form, size, shape, structure with environmental samples that have been repeatedly identified again over the past 10 years. One of those samples in particular being sent to the United States Environmental Protection Agency for identification on behalf of the public welfare. The subsequent refusal of that agency to identify that material, let alone even acknowledge its existence. And of these 4 forms, 3 of them have crossed over directly into the environmental airborne filament form. You have that encasing filament, you have the submicron network, and you have what appears to be similar to a bacterial form within that airborne environmental sample. So this is where a sufficient link and basis has been established for a connection between the environmental contaminants that we have been subject to in the aerosol operation and the subsequent manifestation in the biological form.